Hello, everyone. This is Jawad, your host at Kingdom of Dreams podcast. Today's episode features guest from Silo Season 2, Episode 1, cinematographer Baz Irvine. I had a great conversation with him about Silo and how he came on board on the second season and the amount of work and preparation he had to do, plus a whole lot of other stuff, including life and, the evolution of filmmaking from film to digital and now AI and what's coming up next for him. And do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. This podcast is available on YouTube as well as Spotify and Apple. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Baz Irvine. But it's so incredible to have you. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
tuning in on Kingdom of Dreams
yeah.
podcast and to talk about Silo.
Mhm.
I saw the first season when it came out last year, and it just had amazing similarities to the life that we all sort of led 4 years ago
Yeah,
around the
exactly.
world,
I know, I know, I know.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you try to find all these like, is that what's supposed to mean? Is that the hidden message they're trying to give? And I really enjoyed it, and I was waiting for the second season. I just saw the first episode like this early this morning,
Oh, great.
and absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just want to give a shout out that it's an amazing series and with
yeah.
a lot of plot. It reminds me a lot of very much to like Lost, how things kind of got
Yeah.
unraveled over
Mhm,
time, and I think
mhm,
that's what's going to happen with
mhm.
this too.
Yeah. It's interesting you say about the COVID sort of last few years because when I started season two, I think it was the end of 2022. And it's
Yes.
like the first day I had to go to the studio, it was snowing and I had to drive. And I had this like terror of like being a little schoolboy first day at work. And everybody was in masks. And I got completely lost in the studio. I was walking down these corridors that I would soon become to know as mechanical and you're right. I think the kind of whole Big Brother dystopian brutalist concrete future was only like enhanced by COVID. It's probably one of the benefits of COVID, like for our show. It
Yeah.
gave it another layer of strangeness and weirdness and paranoia and all the other stuff that we all suffered from.
And I think it taps into that, right? But one of the most interesting things in this show was I don't remember which episode it was, but it was just a whole generalization of how long they've been living in a silo
Mm-hmm.
for about, I think it was established 140 years or something.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Yeah,
how the history was based
yeah.
on whatever they need. And it makes you wonder that the grand world that we live in today, how is that if in any way,
Yeah,
whatever you see, whatever you
yeah,
hear,
yeah,
whatever you're
yeah,
told, is it accurate or not?
yeah. I mean, it's very true. I mean, it is. It is like I think with a lot of shows, and when you do season two, it's being written while these world events are happening. So I think there's always like a sense that you sort of reflect the zeitgeist a little bit.
For sure.
And I think you know, you can definitely read into season two and draw parallels with a lot of what's happening out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we see what we want to see based on what we see around us, right? Like if you,
exactly. Yeah,
it's just the way the human brain works. But, talking about, you talked about that the first day, you went to shoot, but kind of going back a little bit, if you can run through me the time that you got the call or you found out by email or through your agent that, you're going to be working on Silo
I, I,
season.
I mean, I think it was like a lot of these uh, shows. It can be a little bit of a protracted process. The kind of it's very unusual to just get a phone call, have an interview, and then you're on it. I think that um, I had a great opportunity. I'd read the scripts. I know I'd watched the first step of season one because remember season one hadn't come out when I started. It
Mm-hmm.
was like I had no idea. Um, in fact, it was called Wool back then. That was the name of the books.
Okay.
And I think that I actually really love that concept because it refers to something, the cleaning, in the silo, and I think that when I saw this first ep of season one, while I was reading the scripts, I was just like, okay, right, I got to do this. This is like a dream. This is like I mean, it really is like a cinematographer's dream for many reasons, and the references, whatever. And I think serendipity just put me in a place where I think I actually was quite forward and suggested to Michael Dinner, who was the showrunner director, that we should just have breakfast. And like, literally the next day we met and had breakfast. And this is like a week before Christmas. And we had breakfast, and then that afternoon they confirmed me. And on Monday I was driving in London to Enfield, which is a very kind of nondescript part of sort of northeast London on the outskirts, and just went to the studio. And I had a week, which is really great actually, because I had a week before Christmas where I saw the sets and met the key people, and it meant that when I had my 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year, 2022, 23, all the ideas could start to sort of percolate. And as you know, we now have a new silo, which was like just incredible. The idea that, I want to be true to all the beauty and things that have happened in season one, but I've got this whole other thing to set up, which is like kind of twice as exciting, because the visual possibilities for Silo 17 were just like, wow, it's like such a, what a great concept. This place is like being, left alone, lifeless, dark, overgrown. Like one of the references actually, which I was amazing, was we looked at shots of Chernobyl, like 35, 40
Mm.
years after the disaster. And nature has just gone, right, we're taking this back. And it's like trying to pull vines and roots, or pulling the concrete back down into earth. And so on a smaller scale, we sort of did that with the new silo that she goes into. And and yeah, I mean, without, well, that there's water in this island, we find that out.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like it's flooded. It's so it was like there was a lot to think about, a lot to work out. And the other beauty of these type of shows is you do get the prep to work stuff out. Huge amount of planning with VFX, obviously,
yeah,
storyboarding, trying ideas, maybe not always realizing those ideas, but sometimes that's what you have to do. It's a process, and then you find the way and you go, right, no, this is it. This is what we need to do. This is how we need to tell the story. Um, yeah.
that's amazing. No, it's so cool that the way this show is, the way the series is, it just unravels, like I said earlier, like the layers of onions, one after the other. Um, but obviously there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that takes place, and you kind of talked about that briefly. But before I go to that, you shot 4 episodes, right?
I shot 1, 2, 6, and 7,
7. Okay.
and they're good apps. I mean, that's the sort of economics and time of a
Yeah.
modern show makes it that in this instance I could set the show up with 1 and 2, but the reality is, like, even as soon as the third or fourth week of shooting, we're already doing bits from like maybe 4.
Yeah.
You've got to utilize whatever sets are built, or some sets. So like obviously the main silo is there the whole time. That's like an incredible studio stage, which is always there. But some of the other stages, we have to we have to turn sets around, like huge
Yeah.
sets. So so I did 1, 2, 6, and 7, and I was on the show from. I mean, we obviously had COVID, we had the actor strike, we had the writer's strike, so we had an enforced hiatus like 2/3 of the way through. But the like the most the weirdestly most kind of serendipitous thing that happened was that we finished shooting in the other silo on the day that the actor strike forced us to stop. So we had
Hmm.
that period of time to get silo 17 ready, because that obviously required like a huge amount of redressing and of art department work. Same structure. I mean, that's the idea. They're all identical to a point. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was a, you know, it was, there was never a day. I mean, if I wasn't shooting, I was shooting underwater tests, or I was looking at rigs that we were going to like fly Rex Rebecca through the air. We know it as Rex. Doing a pre-lighting other sets. I mean, it just, it was a very immersive process.
Right. Going back to your, I had another question, but I'll come back to it later.
Mm, mm,
Going back to your beginnings, right? I
mm,
was going through your IMDb. I think the only title that I remembered in the 90s where you served as camera assistant. Again, it's according to
mm.
IMDb. So I don't know how, I know IMDb sometimes is not accurate,
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It was the Anne Frank
Oh,
documentary that was
yeah, yeah,
narrated
yeah,
by Kenneth Branagh.
yeah, yeah.
Just your beginning of your career. I'm always interested in, we all have stories about how we began our career. What was that
Mm,
one moment that
mm,
did
mm,
it? Do you
mm.
remember?
Yeah, I do actually, because I had a little. I initially started in music. My dad was in the music business, and I had a little period of living in New York, and only for a couple of years, and I thought I was going to go in that direction. But I was always sort of obsessed by film. But growing up in Belfast, it was really restrictive, like the access to projects. And I got onto a course in London that was called. It was a terrible name. It was called Job Fit, which is Joint Board of Film Industry Training. But it was conceived by Lord Putnam, and basically it was to help people from outside London to break into the industry. And to try and sort of like bypass the nepotism that was rife in that era. And the way this course worked was I spent some time at the National Film School and at Central London Poly, which is now University of Westminster. But the really valuable and amazing thing was I was a trainee on different projects, and I'd actually thought I was going to settle in the editing department. That felt right for me. I think other DOPs feel that way, but then I had to do one camera trainee thing to finish my first year, and it was Ken Loach, Riff Raff, um, and with Barry Ackroyd, the DOP, and of course, so the light bulb moment was being on set with the camera, and having been obsessive stills photographer up to that point, I sort of like going, hold on a second. So why did I think I was going to be in the editing department? The kind of of course, Ken Loach was unique in the way he orchestrated the drama on set. And I think that Barry Ackroyd, obviously, I ended up assisting Barry right through the 90s. And I focus pulled and, worked in documentaries with him, as you said, the Anne Frank thing. And, so not only getting that chance, but then also working with him and seeing how the sort of documentary background bled into his work. So yeah, I mean that was it, and I think I think, I mean, although this is so different, I think there was something about working with Ken back then, and kind of understanding like his respect for actors and for the dramatic process was just so huge. I we couldn't wear bright colors on set. We had to turn our back in the action. It was, but it was, and I think, and we didn't put marks down for actors because it was like, that would have broken their, So I learned a lot about that, and then later on, I got to work with other really great DOPs. I worked for a lot with Seamus McGarvey. He's also Northern Irish and a good friend. And, I got to work in different types of films. So, once I found my path, it was a very easy choice. I think it was really just about when I was going to start to shoot, because that's ultimately the thing, isn't it? You work your way up, and then sooner or later, you just know it's the time. You just have to do it. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
In Silo, and in life, it's a two-part question, so you can pick whichever
Oh,
you
oh.
which order. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I lost you for a second.
Um, Working on Silo, what was the most challenging thing that, we when we're on sets, like even if we love what we do, there are days when things drain you and they get onto you and you're trying to figure out a solution. What was that one thing that really hit you professionally and emotionally, and how you overcame it? Plus, same question, but applied to life in general. Nothing to do with film. It can be, but in general, if you're willing to share that.
Well, I mean, the going into the set, I mean, working on a show of this scale with those sets is, of course, a challenge. And I think that, you have to start working on the basis that, everything is just a scale up. Everything's like two times or three times bigger than maybe I'd done before, or, some things. Um, in terms of specifically Silo, I think it's the strangest show because it's set underground, as you know, and when you walk onto these sets, they are stunning. And like, I mean, they are some sets just don't feel, they don't feel so great when you're there. But these ones, like the finishes, the kind of brutalist concrete. I mean, it's weird. I'm staying in the Barbican at the minute in London because we're getting renovations done, and I'm like walking around the Barbican, and it's like, oh my god, it's like, of course, it's like such a big reference. But you stand on this set, and it's like 3 floors high, and what you realize is this is not what you're filming. What you're filming is up there and down there, because the conceit is it's a mile high. And the biggest challenge for me as a cinematographer, which is a very sort of technical challenge, was to kind of go into the silo and then feel like I wasn't being restricted by by just filming this set. I had to imagine everything from above and below and tell the story of that. And I was really, I mean, I don't know how the cinematographers treated it, but I mean, I'm a big fan of J.G. Ballard, and the whole high rise thing, obviously, for me was just like a huge reference. Um, I think, I think that, I mean, I think everything, like, I think, just reading the first step and realizing it was like a silent film, really, apart from the flashback sequences, this is like this incredible chance to do an action piece, and it's a journey of discovery, and you don't want to be ahead of the action because you don't want to give it away. So we had to think of, try to really feel like, the challenge of trying to create like the idea of like this first person narrative that you're following and you're with, and making it, I definitely wanted to make it more sort of visceral and a little bit more kinetic than maybe season one, which is a little bit more sit back because it's world building, it's establishing the whole idea of it. I think now we're in it. Um, how am I going to translate that to my life? The next
It could
part
be
of
a
the
separate, it
question.
could be a separate, it could be a separate incident altogether. It doesn't have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a cinematographer is, it's never been easy. It's like even now the industry is really quiet, and it's a challenge. I think that I find I think the one thing that I know is that you've got to be true to yourself and your vision. And if if you want to do a certain type of thing in cinematography, you've really got to hold out for that. And I know the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my career, I've really like kind of gone, no, I'm not going to compromise. I might be out of work for longer periods between jobs, but I really want to do what I want to do. And that doesn't mean that the next job has to be like Silo. In fact, something I'd really love to do something quite different. I'm hoping,
Right.
but just because I think it's important to challenge yourself. But I mean, life's tough. The last 4 or 5 years have been really tough for everybody. So I think I think that. But I think what's really interesting is, and you alluded to it earlier, is that what will it look like in 10 years time when we look back at this like 3 or 4 year period of productivity, and will we in 20 or 30 years time talk about the COVID years? in relation to art, like how much has that bled into, has that intertwined with the narrative of what we do?
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's something. I'm glad you mentioned what you just said. I talk about this occasionally on different episodes. Is that we always get it, all of us, whether we're in the film industry or just in general in life, we always feel that we're not moving ahead, right? In
Yeah,
life, in
yeah,
profession.
yeah.
And then we look at our life maybe 6 months away ago or a year ago, and we don't see the difference. But I've it is so important to look at your life in the last 25 years or 30 years. And then you start looking at how you have started from absolutely nothing to be where you are, which is not the destination, of course. And then you see, wow, I've made strides. I have made a huge leap of, jumps from here to there to be where I am. And I think that's when you appreciate all the time that you've worked. And I think that's important looking back in the long term.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, it's, I think it's been really interesting the last few years with mental health coming more to the forefront and stuff. And, it is a tough industry, and you've got to be tough, but, I think, you can't be tough to the detriment of your feelings and your emotions. And, I know that, and social media is like a dangerous echo chamber in our world,
Yeah.
um, it's really interesting. I think, we cinematographers, I think we've got a really good little fraternity community, and I've definitely been having chats with other cinematographers in the last couple of years that would never have had before. Where it used to be more, cutthroat and, you know, and there was a lot of swagger and a lot of this and that. I feel like finally people are being honest about, just the
It,
reality of life.
I call it misery loves company, right? Like,
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you mentioned was it Barbican that you mentioned?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you talking about the Barbican cinemas?
Yeah,
Is
well,
that what you?
we're in this strange situation where we've had to move out of like where I live in Camden, and we're in this estate that's next to the Barbican, which is called Golden Lane Estate, and it's famous because have you seen any of Slow Horses, the Apple TV show with Gary Oldman?
I know which one, Slow
Okay,
Horses. I know what you're talking about, but I
so
haven't seen it yet.
it's got this yeah, it's kind of a mixture of all this brutalist architecture and strange alleys and walkways, and you're not quite sure which way you're going or where you're going.
Yeah,
And
I yeah. Sorry,
yeah,
go on.
no. I mean, I'm just mean but what I mean, and it's incredibly inspirational because I've been like walking around with my new camera, just loving it. I think it's like, I feel like I'm on holiday in London because, and a holiday in this world, and realized that when that was built, the Barbican was built like 60s. I think it started maybe in the late 50s. That was also like a huge inspiration for writers and filmmakers at the time, because like this sort of huge concrete Eastern European sort of city just suddenly landed in East London. It's like amazing, and it's great. And you know what? It really shows me like how important, how as a cinematographer, how important it is to hit the streets. Even if you're not taking pictures,
Yes,
just walk around, like
observe.
watch it get dark, watch street lights come on, watch shadows form. Just like, you got to really take all that stuff in. And if you do, you can really inform your work. I love it. I mean, I could just walk, or through any city I visit. If I'm lucky enough to travel, is like I'm always out just at night, like walking around. I love it.
Yeah.
It's such a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah,
And then
I completely agree with you. That's exactly what I do whenever I'm traveling. I find
yeah,
for work I always take one day and I just walk around. But the reason I asked about Barbican
mm.
was because one of my films, In Search of My Sister, which is right here,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
it was
yeah.
screened at Barbican cinemas.
Oh right,
And
okay, yeah.
I remember when you were talking about Silo and Barbican, and
Uh,
it hit me. I'm like, I remember walking in that building up
Yeah,
and down in those alleyways and skywalks and the concrete
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah,
And then I just remembered that I didn't realize that how
yeah,
similar
yeah,
it is to Silo.
yeah. It's well, I'm not 100% sure because I never met the production designer who did the first season. It was
Yeah.
a brilliant new production designer, Nicole, who did season two. But um, the Barbican obviously came to mind. But there was also years ago I was lucky enough. I was in Johannesburg and I was lucky enough. I hope I've got the name right. It's called the Ponte Tower, and it's a circular tower that was built, I think, again in about the 60s by the famous Italian architect. And it basically has a central core which is empty, and it must have been a huge inspiration for the production designer of season one. Never got a chance to ask him, and
Mm.
in that tower, I think it might have changed since, but when I got a chance to go into it, and this is like in like round about God, sometime in like about 2007, it was like the better flats were at the top, and they threw the rubbish down in the middle, and it was hell. The bottom three floors were literally the mechanical world, the underworld. It was terrifying. So when I got into the silo, I was instantly. I kept saying to people, "Oh, this is based on that tower in Johannesburg," and everybody looked at me as if to say, "Well, what are you talking about?" Um, but and it's funny. There's a film coming out. I haven't seen it yet. I'm really desperate to see it, called The Brutalist, which is about a brutalist architect whose name I don't remember, and I think it's 4 hours long, or nearly 4 hours.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just looking at it. It's 3.5 hours long. It's
three and a
dark.
half hours
So
long. I cannot wait to see it because I think
I think it's
a lot of
sorry.
DOPs are sort of have are sort of frustrated architects. There's definitely a symbiosis. There's definitely a symmetry between us.
Yeah. What cameras did you guys use? Was it Venice?
No, we used the Sony. I'm sorry, we used the Alexa, the Mini LFs. They'd used them in the first season, and the thing is, I did two things for season two. I changed the format for the first season was 2-1, and when I walked into the silo, I was like, guys, it's like even though it is vertical, the sets I could see were built for like 239, so like widescreen, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
And I also changed the lenses. I just, that's a very subtle thing that I wanted to do, just slightly differently, slightly more retro feel. And
sure.
but we used the Alexa Mini LFs, and it worked really well for season one. I love Sony's too. I think when you go onto a show like that and they're doing post production for the first season, you know, it's a bit of a willful choice to just want to change the cameras when they've got a process that's up and running. And I knew that, so I think changing the lenses and changing the ratio was like that felt like okay, I've got my way. Um, but I've worked in, I love the Sony Venice as well. I think you got to like be honest with yourself as a cinematographer. I think you've got to approach every project and really try and not be prejudiced about what you think you need to use, especially
Yeah,
lenses.
yeah,
There's so much ego with lenses. The sort of notion that you bring if you work with some amazing set of G series anamorphics from Panavision, which are incredible, that you're going to imbue the story with some. And I love them. I don't get me wrong. I love to work with them, but I just mean that you've really got to try to put your ego at the door and go right. Let's
yeah,
what's right. Like test. Work it out. You might be surprised. And I love it when I read about a cinematographer who's ended up using something left field because they worked out that was the best way to go. I think it's really fascinating how much different type of glass can affect, on a very subliminal level, how we perceive things,
yeah,
especially sets.
yeah. No, I agree, and I think so. For me personally, I mean, I've done ridiculous amount of editing. I've done a
Mm.
ridiculous amount of camera operating,
Yeah.
maybe cinematography here and there, not too much, but directing as from one of the things that I've sort of learned as a director is that it's so important now, and I think that comes with time and experience, is that you forget about the equipment. You just throw that out the window
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
focus on your story.
Mm.
And if I can pick on anything when I'm watching a film in terms of look, I obviously I can tell anamorphic versus, 16
Yeah,
by 9.
yeah.
But an average audience won't even notice the anamorphic versus 16 by 9, especially when they're watching on a
Mm.
TV screen or a movie theater.
Yeah.
So it's all about the story. And then speaking about cameras, have you read about 28 years later that's being shot on iPhone 15 Pro Max?
Somebody, I've heard it mentioned, yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, what? Of course, like, and also, like, can I say, one of the things we do is we do, as recce's, and and it's very easy to pull out a Leica or a Hasselblad on a recce, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I see the world like partially filtered through the iPhone, and it's such a great tool. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and it, we, all of our apps where we can, frame with like Artemis and things that are on an iPhone. But yeah, I mean, great. Like,
It's amazing. I mean, obviously they're using, map boxes and a whole lot of other
mm,
equipment, but I I shot some stuff with 15 Pro Max, not even like a camera app like Filmic or Blackmagic, just
mm.
actually
Yeah,
within the
yeah,
app. It is insane without color
yeah.
correction, and like the highlights are there,
Yeah.
everything. It's crazy. And I wonder
Mm, mm.
how long before Apple will start shooting all of their series on the iPhones.
I mean, like, I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable, and also it's like, we even just down to like filters that you can quickly use and to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
stuff. I mean, I think it's brilliant. I love how the iPhone is. I mean, I say the iPhone or phones, have
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
like opened up like a whole new world of you know like when it comes to inspiration for jobs, like obviously there's still all the great, like, forget about cinematography, but there's great photographers, the Egglestons, and that we've referenced time and time again. And now more and more, when I'm like doing mood boards for a job or I'm getting imagery, I'm pulling street photographers off Instagram. Some of them have just shot stuff on their iPhones, and I'm just so blown away by
It's
that
crazy.
imagery. And I'm finding more and more that that's the imagery that inspires me, especially like night in cities, which of course I've already mentioned, so slight obsession. But it's just it's this kind of huge democratization of of how we see things and how people can have access to creating imagery. That I love it. I mean, bring it
Yeah.
on.
I mean, it's technology has done so much. I was just watching some ad on Instagram. Um, so basically you can shoot a short film or a feature
mm,
film, whatever, with the script and the human beings doing their actions as you have written it in the script. And there's an app or some AI software which literally converts everything from real to Pixar style animation,
oh God.
including the environments and
Really? Wow.
everything. And I'm
Wow.
like, if I want to make an animation now,
Yeah.
why would I go to an anime? As much as I would love to, but from a logistic and money standpoint, why would you do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's changing everything. It's changing a
Sure.
lot of stuff.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it is. And, but look, I feel lucky in a way because I'm a, ultimately I'm a film baby. I grew up
Yeah,
on
yeah,
film,
yeah.
and I was lucky, as a cinematographer, I worked a lot on film before going digital. And thank God, because
Yes.
it's and you know and of course that has a huge influence on me, and the films and shows that I watched that first really turned me on to cinematography. But I wonder what I'd feel like if I didn't have that hadn't had that opportunity. but then after saying that, like I've been looking at some other cinematographers' work just even this morning, for the BSc, and it's just like stunning. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the one thing about digital is film the process of shooting and developing one film kind of made it this sort of slightly enigmatic sort of thing that wasn't accessible, and now it's like the greatest
Yeah.
image of the year could be created by some kid in the streets in Mumbai. It's like that's the beauty of it.
But I also think I can speak for myself, and maybe I think you probably would say the same thing. If I hadn't shot on Bolex 16 millimeter and done flatbed editing, I probably wouldn't be what I am today, the way I am because of that. And I think it's the same similar for people who are growing up on iPhones and AI, is to have that knowledge at least just for the sake of it, so it helps you go in that direction a little
Yeah,
bit more easily and efficiently.
yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, but I agree as well. Like I edited on film, Steenbecks, and
Oh
I
yeah.
was like track cut. Was it called track cutting? I was trying to remember all
Yeah.
the
You would put them in
terms.
the sprockets
Oh my
and
god,
then you
yeah,
would
yeah, yeah. And
cut
then
them and you
carrying
would
these
tape them and
huge tins to like Metricolor, and and it was, oh man, it was such like those days of. I feel really lucky. And the other, you know what? You know what's really crazy? Somebody was asking me the other day. It's like you asked me about my first start in film,
yeah.
and I was talking about Ken Loach. Well, the other film I got to be a trainee on in that period was David Fincher's Alien 3.
Oh my God, no
I know.
way.
So I was like, I wasn't the only trainee because it was such a big film, but I rocked up at Pinewood. Once again, it was in the snow. I remember I had to like leave London at like 3 in the morning to get like a bus and a train and another bus to get to Pinewood. I didn't have a car. And I walked onto set, and within 2 minutes I'm in with the camera crew, and Sigourney Weaver stood there, and Fincher is like, nobody knows who Fincher is, like
Yeah.
and and at that point the DOP was Jordan Cronenweth, the great DOP who shot Blade Runner, and I mean, if I could sort of teleport myself back to that time, because obviously like then I wasn't able to process cinematography. I was like terrified of like anything that I had to do, any chore, even just making tea. It was pretty brutal
Yeah.
days. You weren't. It wasn't so enlightened. And also that film, and again, Alien 3 had it was a prison planet in the future. I mean, talk about dystopian future, brutalist sort of imagery. But I got to see Jordan Cronenweth do stuff. I mean, he was starting to become ill. I can't remember, where I think he had Parkinson's. And then Alex Thompson came in, who was another like this great British DOP who worked with Nick Rogue, and I did some amazing stuff, and he took over, it was just an amazing time. But yeah, all of those early film influences, and loading camera, 16 mil, and
Mm.
I think it's sort of how I feel about it. I mean, one thing that really, 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 really winds me up when I'm shooting digital is like, oh, it's probably like the last job I'll ever do now. But like some directors will just let the camera roll, like they literally will never cut. And
Yeah.
and the thing is, it actually costs a lot of money because you have to process everything you shoot. So if you run for 20, 30 seconds after, you say cut or whatever, that all has to get processed. So it's like, but I love, the discipline of knowing that film is expensive,
Yeah.
and knowing that you've got to turn it up, turn over at the right time and cut at the right time is,
Yeah.
that's something I wish everybody could
I
learn
agree.
or just feel, because, and I remember when we used to do high speed stuff and like photosonics, we used to call it like a money machine because you could just hear the film like, whizzing through the camera, and you could
Yeah.
literally see the kind of like figures just in front of you based on the money that was being spent on stock. But not anymore. Back in the
No,
day.
it's true. When I've edited a lot for somebody else
Yeah,
a while ago, like there will be like and an interview would just keep running, and even like B-roll shots, like when they're fall,
yeah,
and like for an editor to go through that, it's a lot of time, right?
yeah,
But
of course.
going back to Alien 3, I'm
Yeah.
so glad you mentioned that because
Mm.
I prevented myself from watching Alien 3 until 2 months ago
Oh, really? Wow.
because I
Okay.
had heard such terrible things.
Yeah.
But at the moment the film started, the cinematography and the
Mm.
concept,
Mm.
I mean, besides the visual effects, which are probably the only down part of the film, I thought it was a really, really good film. I mean, the atmosphere, typical Fincher, right? Like style,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was such a well done film. And good that you were part of it, man. That's
Well,
awesome.
yeah, I mean, and I think it also interesting because it was on the cusp of VFX taking over. I think when you got to Alien 4,
Yeah.
then all of the aliens became fully VFX at that point. And in on Alien 3, like I remember shooting some test days where we had like whippets on set being pulled into little alien outfits so that they could skate, like they would slide along the tile floors, and it was and also all of the those huge fireball effects and that were real, and also
Yeah.
the British cast, it was
Yes.
if you look at it's like a who's who of like these incredible actors. Some of them aren't with us anymore, and as I say, I obviously can only I look through back now with the optics of being in the industry for a while, but like I
Yeah.
really do wish, oh my god, to see the guy who shot Blade Runner lighting sets at Pinewood, but not having any understanding at all of what he was doing. If I could turn the clock back, that would be my
Yeah.
little week I'd like to revisit.
That would be for sure. That would
Yeah,
be for sure.
yeah,
Um, you know, with Silo, now that you've shot it and everything, what's for number one, before we wrap this up, I would love to speak to you again when episode 6 and 8 comes out, if you're up
yeah,
for it.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Number
yeah.
two, what's next for you? Is there anything that you're able to
I
talk?
think, I mean, look, there's stuff, it's the industry. I mean, also just to say that when you do a show like Silo, and luckily being the lead DOP and being heavily involved, it doesn't finish when the show finishes. So I was on the show for 15 months, and I needed a break. I took a couple of months off afterwards. But in the summer, I was grading it. I was going into Company 3 in London and working
Mm.
with a colorist in Toronto, amazing colorist Bill.
Oh,
Um,
I'm in Toronto.
oh, are you? Okay. Well, if
Yeah.
you, yeah, cool. Well, I would have loved to have been there, but the days were quite sort of spread out. But
Yeah.
so I really had the thing is, I could have just gone on to another job immediately, but at that point I just thought, oh god, wouldn't it be great to just have a summer and see this job through, and actually really be there to control the visuals and the look and the coloring, for people who don't know it, that time in the with the with the colorist is like, well, it's just essential, and so now I'm like, um, you know, I'm, I'm just considering other things, and I think there's been there's definitely been a very quiet period in the UK, and I think the streamers, and I think for
It's
many,
everywhere, man. It's
it's
everywhere.
like for everybody, it's been the same. And I'm like, I know there's good things coming up at the start of next year. I can't really say anything that, sort of jinx anything, but
Yeah.
um, I think my aim for next year is to shoot above ground, and see the sunshine. And
You, you,
I
you
listen. I don't
sound
mind a bit of dystopian future. Although I have to say, the Guardian this morning described Ep1. They said in a very kind of sort of flattering way. I think they described it as visual sludge, and I think they were referring to the kind of the darkness of it and the kind of thing. So I'm going to try and do some above ground visual sludge
Yeah.
with maybe not as sludgy as normal.
Yeah. No, you know what? It's funny you mentioned that because one of the things, and I know it's done for with purpose
Yeah.
because the story demands it.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I was watching the first season, the first episode, I'm like, holy crap, I can't deal with this. It's so depressing. And this was around COVID and all, you know, then you get used to it. But then obviously when, you know, when you see the outside, the contrast is important. So the audience feels that you have to be in that, you know, depressing environment, and then you have to feel that, you know, trees and spring type weather. And
Yeah.
but yeah, it can take a toll on the audience too, for sure. It certainly did for me with the first episode the last season.
Well, I think the first episode of this season, it starts obviously
Well,
outside, but
yeah,
there are bits that are dark, but that is the story, and
but
I
you
like.
buy into it, right? Because you've
Yeah, of
invested
course.
your
Yeah,
time
yeah.
into it. Yeah,
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 and as a cinematographer, you've got to be brave because you are going to be the only one who's fighting to keep it that dark. You're the one who knows probably the levels you can get away with because everybody else's interest is to see more. And I'm like, oh, less, less, less,
yes. That's a DP. Every
Yeah, yeah,
DP is
yeah.
like that. Less
Oh, yeah,
lighting.
yeah.
Amazing, Baz, man. Thank you so much for your
Okay.
time. It's
Yeah.
truly been a pleasure. I would love to continue talking. I just,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, but let's chat again. We'll
Yeah,
reach
no,
out to your
absolutely.
agent.
Please, that would be an absolute
And
pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
so you did 1, 2, 6, and 8, right?
No, 1, 2, 6, and 7, and
Seven.
there's
Okay.
a couple of things that happen in 7, especially, that are quite different. I think I'm pretty sure that Apple are releasing each an ep a week. So actually, I think there's maybe going to be like 3 eps start of the new year by the time, something like that. So yeah, we can
Yeah.
chat again. I'd love to.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're gonna try to. I mean, we've done this in the past. We're gonna try to
Mhm.
get access to the
Yeah,
series
yeah, yeah,
early,
yeah, yeah.
and if we are able to, then we will probably chat again. But we won't release it until the day it comes
Okay,
out. So yeah, but
great.
we'll keep in touch. Awesome, man.
Take care, man. Listen.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your
Yeah.
time. Pleasure talking
Okay.
to you.
Okay. You too. Bye bye
All
then.
right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.